You have probably heard by now, there is a baby formula crisis in America. What you may not know is that the Biden administration has reportedly been working on this issue for the last several months, as Jen Psaki told reporters Friday on her last day as the White House's press secretary. So if the Biden administration has been working on this for the last several months, why is there a crisis now? Is this another self-inflicted crisis, or is there something the Biden administration has no control over, as U.S. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg seemed to imply yesterday on Face the Nation?
Fundamentally, we are here because a company was not able to guarantee that its plant was safe, and that plant has shut down.
But that is the federal government's job as regulators to help ensure
as
safety
regulators,
of the
yes,
plant.
but let's be very clear. This is a capitalist country. The government does not make baby formula, nor should it.
With me now to talk about all of it is Dr. Dave Brat, the dean at Liberty University School of Business and a former member of Congress. Dr. Brat, welcome back to the program.
Hey, great to be on. Great to see you.
Good to see you. First, I want to get your response to Secretary Buttigieg's comments there about what's caused this.
Yeah, well, he's the first member from the administration that I've seen acknowledge that we at least ought to live in a capitalist free market society. Of course, we do not. Everything out of the current administration has been state-run, top-down, and we basically have a system failure across the board, whether it's the Supreme Court or the State Department or national security or the border or CIA, FBI. These are all systematic system failures across the board. And so now you're seeing the greatest system failure of it all, which is the failure of utilizing free markets and the price system. So you can blame it on businesses now, but that's after you've inhibited business for 2 years with COVID disasters and terrible policies from the government, top down from the federal government. And so, and all of this has been aided and abetted by Central Planning 101 out of the Federal Reserve, right? They now have printed $9 trillion on their balance sheet, on the Fed balance sheet, in addition to the federal government going $30 trillion in debt and a $5.2 trillion budget, gigantic budget explosion. Which all comes at the cost of the free market system, creating inflation. They've printed too much money. I can go in depth on that if you want to in a minute. But that this is the furthest thing from having a free market society. This is government has caused all the supply chain incidents, and Pete Buttigieg is the head of that. So of course he doesn't want to acknowledge his failure in this.
I do want to get into the inflation part of this. But it very, very specifically says there that this is just a company's failure to prove that they're able to operate safely. Do you agree with that assessment?
No, I don't agree with that assessment. It's all part of a huge piece, which is impossible for our finite human minds to analyze, right? The free market system, it's an information puzzle, right? And the smart guys on this, Milton Friedman and Hayek, it's like a supercomputer that's needed to solve these problems, and the price system solves it for us. And so if you let the free market system work, one company's failures isn't going to mess up the entire country. It's the fact that we're at war without going to war and declaring war. That we've printed money, we've messed up the supply chains, we're declaring war on China's economy and Ukraine's economy. There's all sorts of secondary effects that go through Europe and our other supply chain friends. And so, no, the free market in itself can solve this in a week, no problem, no sweat. You wouldn't even sweat. So no, it's totally wrong.
Well, let's talk a bit about how the market has developed the situation that we have right now, because one of the things that we've learned in the shortage was there was apparently a single plant producing something like 40% of the nation's supply of baby formula.
Now you're getting
Is that something that should be avoided, could be avoided? Is that a result of capitalism? How does that play into this?
No, I mean, everybody watched Tucker last night. He goes in depth more time than I got to go on this. But the baby formula stuff has to go through a government monopoly in order to be regulated properly, et cetera. And then these guys have the nerve to say this is a free market enterprise. And then I think I heard last night 80% of the revenues from the baby thing go back to the government, right? So it's an in-house billing cycle. It's called economic capture. James Buchanan won a Nobel Prize for studying the obvious, that government wants to grow itself. And look up Jim Buchanan, Virginia School, Nobel Prize in economics, and you'll understand everything that's going on here.
Well, President Biden was asked about this on Friday as well, because, of course, this is a big story because, you threaten people's kids in all sorts of ways, it becomes a problem. We've seen this on the education front, school board meetings. And when you start threatening mother's supply of baby food, people get agitated. So, of course, this is a crisis the White House has to deal with, whether they want to or not. So President Biden was asked about this on Friday. I want to play clip 7 and then get your reaction to that.
Should you have taken those steps sooner, before parents got to these shelves and couldn't find formula?
If we'd been better mind readers, I guess we could have, but we moved as quickly as the problem became apparent to us. And we have to move with caution as well as speed.
Fair assessment that the only way to avoid this is to be a better mind reader?
Yes, for him, given his economic philosophy, that is the proper response. All of human history has been run by pharaohs and kings and despots and tyrants and central planners. And all of human history was marked by $500 a year you get to live on. Your family gets $500. That's all of human history, except for this miracle of free markets. So yeah, if it's your view that the central government planners, need to guess right on all this stuff, that's consistent. They guessed wrong, and you're living in with the consequences of 10% inflation minimum, right? Foods 20, energies 40, gasoline's 40% up, et cetera. Wages have been flat for 40 years. The only people that walk away rich from the 07-08 financial crises are the fat cats and the corporate lobbyists. And the same thing's happening right now. We got an everything bubble, which is even worse, right? It's even more overvalued than the 07-08 financial crisis. So there's more to come in, buckle in, and you're going to see central planning at work in your life. And, I feel bad because it's I'm a Presbyterian economist, but I'm kind of a boring guy. And I would preach on this thing, God first, always, Constitution, economics, family, all these, it's boring, right? It's boring until it's not boring. Now you're seeing the not boring part where you're living in crises. And so people got to get real. It's these basic principles. We need to stay true to them. And everybody's got a message constantly in favor of these things, which have given you the lives you have, with the kids you have, with the family and the house you have. It's a miracle. And we need to stick to our knitting.
We're talking to Dr. Dave Brat from Liberty University. Dr. Brat, last question, I think, on this subject. There are a lot of people who will look at this situation and say, yeah, but, this is frustrating, but we don't want rogue, dishonest companies putting chemicals into baby formula and having it not be inspected. There's no accountability, sending it to children and then poisoning them. Is that what you're proposing? A world where there's no accountability, there's no oversight, so companies can kill children at will?
Not really. We got this thing called Twitter now, and this thing called Facebook and Wikipedia. There's no shortage of information. One company does anything bad, they're going to have whistleblowers inside the company. If they fail, you'll know about it in 5 seconds. And if you let the market alone, there's this fascinating thing that we used to have, what's called bankruptcy. If you're a firm and you goof up baby formula, and if you goof it up intentionally, you're bankrupt. And that's the way it should be. And so, no, there's plenty of information flow in the old days. And now that the First Amendment and freedom is under attack, it's another day. No, right. That's right. The American people are very capable of policing themselves and let it rip. If we have more markets will solve the problem, not cause them.
Dr. Brat, another subject I want to take on with you, an additional shortage that our economy seems to be dealing with. Over the weekend, I was at a soccer tournament between games. We tried to go to one restaurant and get some Mexican food, and they said, we're not open yet because we have diminished hours because we don't have enough workers. We went across the street. They were open, but they had a sign that said, please be patient. We have a labor shortage. Be kind to the people who did show up. Why does it seem that everywhere we go, there's not enough workers, yet at the same time, we hear that a lot of people don't have work?
Yeah. How can that be? Makes you scratch your head. That's what happens when you lose the free market system to beat a dead horse. All right. So what you're looking at, really, what's the cause of this? GDP per capita, the income you make per person, has been going down for 50 years. Why has it been going down for 50 years? You can go Google all this at the Federal Reserve. Just go to Fred. Because productivity has been going down for 50 years. And then on top of that, the real interest rate has been in a state of managed decline for 40 years. The real interest rate, the federal funds rate, the rate the banks charge each other, has been 0% for a decade. Free money, who does well under that? The corporate oligarchs do great. Mom and pop, grandma, grandpa get decimated. No savings, no bonds, 0% interest for you. What's that got to do with anything? What's that got to do with the issues you raised? That is why the Fed had to print $9 trillion on its balance sheet. That's why the Fed has gone 30 trillion, the federal government has gone 30 trillion in debt, because it had to prop up a dead economy. The real economy is a corpse, right? And if you want to go Google this in detail, go to Robert Gordon at Northwestern. He's the greatest figure, 30 years, 40-year research project, not the latest headline, not Dave Brat's opinion, 40-year research project by the top in the country, recognized by all economists. It's the greatest on productivity. Go look at his YouTube from 6 months ago. He explains exactly why we are right now. And so how can you have wages going up right now? We got tight labor markets because we pumped all the money into the economy, right? And then and then we've decimated businesses. I got businesses right around me in Lynchburg that are out of business because they couldn't get labor, right? Because there is savings from the checks that went out still rippling in, caused by government run amok. And so you ask for a logical answer to a system that is no longer logical, right? It's central planning. It's what you expect from the central planners is a loss of rationality, another systematic loss due to the latest and greatest politics brought to you by the Marxists in power.
One other topic I want to get to you, it's related to all of this, has to do with inflation. Jen Psaki, her final day on Friday as the White House press secretary, but she had some comments about inflation and the situation that we're dealing with and the landscape that the Biden administration is working in generally. Let's play clip 6, and then I want your response.
We know that the president, that the big driver of this was the pandemic and the impact on supply chains, and then the uptick in the pandemic with Delta last summer. Then we had an additional challenge, as you've noted some of these, but with the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, which drove up energy prices, and that is the biggest driver of inflationary costs at this point in time.
So is Russia driving up energy prices the biggest driver of inflation?
No, F in economics for Psaki. The only cause of inflation, as Milton Friedman explained back in the 1960s when he won the Nobel Prize for monetary theory, explaining inflation. Inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. You printed too much money. John Taylor's the new guy at Stanford, been around for 20, 30 years. Go look at him. The federal funds rate right now, if you don't want to have inflation, should be 6.5%, according to Taylor. It's, I think it's at 1% right now, the federal funds rate. So they were wrong in 07, 08. They printed way too much money in 04, 05. Now interest rates have been zero for the last decade. And guess what? You just created an everything bubble by printing too much money. So it's all true. You do have a supply chain shocks. You do have a war going on that distorts everything. You got the energy prices are going bananas. You got food prices, but it's all caused by printing too much money. If you don't do that, if there's only a certain amount of money, you can only buy so much stuff. So prices can't go up. So everybody go just look at John Taylor. It's called the Taylor rule for a reason. It's what the Fed actually follows. If you go follow the Fed experts all watch Taylor, and they just refuse to raise the interest rate a little bit because they're scared the market will pop and it will pop. You got to take the pain somewhere.
Dr. Brat?
And unfortunately, the oligarchs have gotten away with it, and the pain has only come to a theater near you.
And how do we fix it in about 60 seconds?
Oh, well, you don't get in the ditch in the first place. Right now, they put us in a terrible spot. You got to increase the federal funds rate, increase the interest rate, take a mini recession. That's going to be some pain, but that'll get rid of the inflation. If you don't get rid of the inflation, that a horse is out of the barn, they say, and it's off to the races. So you've got to solve that one. Go read about Paul Volcker in the early 80s with Reagan. That's how you solve it.
Dr. Brat, we appreciate your time so much. This is a concern on the minds of many Americans, whether it's getting a job or baby formula or whatever it is. Yep. And we have such a hard time wrapping our head around what's going on. And we appreciate you enlightening us today. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, well, everybody go study, get your kids studying, and God bless all of you. Thanks for having me on the show. I love you guys.